Hey, welcome to the Backyard Professor Live. I was going to make this a recording. Today is my last day on my vacation, and I fly home tomorrow. And then I'll be back in my library, and I'll feel much more comfortable about doing some really good, solid, standard stuff. But on this vacation, I have had the opportunity, which is real nice, to have read the majority of Michael Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm. And I have caught a cold down here in Louisiana where it's 80 degrees, 80% humidity. I have to sit in the car. The wind is really blowing and it's really bad. Anyway, this is a completely amateur production and it's all good. But I wanted to get this live review in because Heiser is a good scholar. Yet his book really disturbs me. And maybe it's not so much his book as it is his assumptions of his book. And he does let those assumptions out. My hair's a wreck. He lets those assumptions out at the end of his book, with which I cannot accept any of them. Now, what interests me is this text because it's done with superb scholarship. This is not against Heiser's scholarship in any manner, but because he is such a superb biblical scholar, and he knows the ancient Near Eastern texts, the Ugaritic texts, the Phoenician documents, the Sumerian and Mesopotamian and Babylonian and the Hebrew and the Dead Sea Scrolls, it shows his assumptions even stronger, and he can't see them. And to me, that's amazing. That is mind-boggling ridiculous. But I can see them. Now, it's probably my weakness in understanding his view. And I'll be willing to be criticized on that. But I will share with you what I have done is anybody who ever ends up with this particular text that I have owned, The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser, anyone who ends up with this after I'm gone is going to be able to see my issues with his book because I've written them right into the margins. And I'm going to share. I do too. Yeah. Hey, Myth Vision. Good to see you, brother. Yeah. I like Heiser too, but his assumptions in this book, I cannot deal with. I've written them in the margins, so I'm going to do this very unprofessionally. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take bits and pieces of the sentences that just hit me like a ton of brick, and then I'm going to read. I'll try to explain the context, and I'm going to read my comments on it because that's interesting, Derek, because I haven't read his book Demons, but I've read this one. He also mailed me his PhD dissertation on the Council of the Gods, and it was absolutely phenomenal. It was really good. Technically, this is supposed to be a continuation of his dissertation. His information on the Nephilim, on the giants in Genesis 6, etc., and I know Derek from Myth Vision, for those of you who are coming in, Derek's here in the house. Thank you, good brother. Good to see you. He has done some really good interviews that I would strongly recommend on this Nephilim, and you and Neil at Gnostic Informant have done some real good stuff along these lines. Heiser does address this quite a bit in his context for his worldview. And but his assumptions, here's the catch, and I'll give you the answer right now. I'm done blubbering about it. I'll give you the answer right now, and then I will show you why I can't accept it. He indicates that the council of the gods, the holy ones, were the sons of El, the 70 sons of El. In Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9, El divides up the nations to the different deities. And of course, this is where Yahweh famously gets Israel. So Israel is Yahweh's portion. So this council of the deities, now this is the same council that in Psalm 82, Yahweh tells the gods, you have done wrong. You have not taken care of the nations the way you should, and therefore you shall die as men. Now, Heiser's doctoral dissertation and his interpretation in this text on the evidence that the Psalm 82 is dealing with deities, not just judges and not just mortal men, but actual deities, because it is about the council. That's a really good part. I entirely concur. I have collected a lot of information on this Council of the Gods. Being a former Mormon apologist, of course, I thought all of this confirmed Joseph Smith like crazy. And so I went gung-ho. Dan McClellan and I had quite a few interesting discussions on this, and he would tell me several different articles to go get, and I would go get them, and then I would explain to him, hey, I got this article, that article, and he goes, oh yeah, I haven't got that one, and we had a good time there for a while. He is Last Frybender, and again, this is not a personal attack on Heiser, his person, in any way. It's just his assumptions that really bother me. Here's the answer. This council of the gods are the immortal gods. And so we're talking immortal beings. So by definition, and I'm trying to be fair, I so promise, I will try to be fair to Heiser here. He doesn't see this assumption. Immortal beings, in contrast to what? We humans, of course. We live, what? 70 years, 75 years. Today, in biblical times, we didn't. The average lifetime back in 600 BC could not have been much over 50 years if you're doggone lucky. So this group of immortal beings from the High Father. Now, this is El, this is the god El, of which the Hebrew word Elohim, as Heiser and other scholars note, is absolutely properly plural, without question. That's not even an issue. The Hebrew, Heiser's understanding of Hebrew is as good as anybody I've ever seen. And I've studied Hebrew enough to grasp the serious plurality of the Elohim. Okay, so we've got all that. These guys they've been around, and I'm going to say this, trying to be fair to Heiser. In contrast to humans, they've lived at least 1 billion years. And now, I'm talking billion with a B, you guys. I'm trying to be very sincerely serious. I'm trying to take the ancient Hebrew meaning seriously for the moment. An immortal being, that means they have not died. Now, realistically, and it doesn't matter, let's say you're a young earth creationist. Okay, I'll even grant you that. Okay, so the earth has been around for 6,000 years. This council of the gods, being immortal beings, was around for 1 billion years before the earth was even a twinkle in God's eye. And I'm serious. Their understanding of the world could not possibly be how the Bible portrays it. And this leads me to realize, guess what? This is all just invented by some people in the Sinai desert who are so myopic, who are so limited in their intellect and capability of actually understanding the true nature of the earth, the true size of the earth, the relationship of the earth with the cosmos, that they can't possibly be describing reality. Now, and I agree with Heiser here. He says we can't take our modern view and put it back onto the Old Testament. I absolutely agree with that. I am not trying to do that, I promise. I already get that alone is enough to disqualify the Old Testament as dealing with reality. Here's the catch. You and I, we have what, 2,500, 2,600 years of hindsight to see. We know how the world works that these ancient people did not have. They do not have our hindsight. Now, that doesn't give us the right to stamp our view of reality onto them. I'm not doing that. I'm saying these immortal beings, at a minimum, would be a billion years old, even if you make it Earth years. Their knowledge, their hindsight, their foresight, their understanding of what the Earth was, where it fits into the cosmos in relation to the entire cosmos, etc., is going to be so much more complete than ours. And being in the council of the gods, where they counsel with one another, trying to figure out what do we do with these humans, etc., it is impossible that they are as myopic as the Sinai Desert people, or if you want, the Egyptians who left Egypt and became Israel. It doesn't, okay, if they were Canaanites, none of that changes this issue. The outlook, the worldview, and how Heiser puts it in his book is the supernatural worldview of the ancient Israelites. Okay, good. That they got from their deity is where I cannot go. There is no way that the attitude in relation to Israel versus other nations, or a particular geographical location of land in relation to another area of land, etc., there is no way a being who has been around for a billion years would let the Israelites have their myopic worldview. It wouldn't be that way. It can't. And there is my problem with Heiser, because, and I'll get to this. I've got a cold. I apologize. I'm not doing too good right now. It's crazy. I'm down here in New Orleans and I've got a cold. My issue, now here's what Myth Vision says. Hey, Derek, you mind if I post your comment? My friend, my dear friend, my good friend, my inspiration. My issue is the idea that thinking these deities are real beings that exist for real. I'm with you. I understand. For the sake of the argument, I will grant that premise, though, right? I've seen you do that to great effect in many of your interviews and videos, yeah. So for the sake of the argument, we will say, okay, let's accept them as real. What I can't accept is real beings who have a billion years of living and knowledge under their belt, and they have been around the earth for thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not millions, if not billions of years. They already know the entire structure of reality. And the Old Testament depiction of the council of the gods' attitude toward people, toward the land, toward the earth itself, is so unrealistic as to be completely fatally flawed. That's the problem. Yeah, in my opinion. The last Frybender says, I agree. The book forces Christians to see the plurality of the council of the gods. It does, but that is the Hebrew. I'm very sincere. Israel early on was not monotheistic. That can be established from the Hebrew Bible. Now, I jumped on this with Dan McClellan and other LDS scholars and other biblical scholars when I was studying the Council of the Gods. The dogma of the monotheism came way, way, way later. It was not in early Israel. I'm not trying to offend you, Frybender. I'm just saying that that's not where my problem with this whole thing lies. Exactly. I think Derek's got it. How do they not know things beyond the ancient authors depicting them? See, you say it so much better than I. That is precisely my fatal problem with accepting this. And then Heiser, in the very end of his book, bless his heart, I love the guy. He was great. He got you to think, you know. You got to love a guy that does that. Like you, Derek, like Neil at Gnostic Informant. The issue is they wouldn't have had their attitude. Let me just read something. This is going to be, this is on the worst part of the book, in my opinion. And I agree. I'm trying hard not to put my modern view onto the ancient scripture, but a being or group of beings, 70 of them in fact, who has been around for 1 billion years, could not possibly think of a holy war of extermination against others simply because they are giants as opposed to being normal size. Heiser makes a big deal about that. My thinking was, well, that's as racist as saying, well, the Japanese have a different style of eye than we do, or we are white and the blacks, what if they felt the right to exterminate all white people because of the color of our skin, etc.? That's immoral. I cannot grasp that a group of immortal beings have that kind of thinking. So this Herem, this Kerem, this holy war of extermination is palpably ludicrous in light of the fact that it's supposed to be coming from immortal beings, and they want the other nations exterminated because Yahweh wants his throne in a dirty, hot, sandy desert of Israel. Now, if the theology is accurate, Yahweh has already created the entire earth. And I've got news for you. The Swiss Alps, or the oceanfront property of Oregon, or the Grand Tetons in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or even the southwest of the state of Utah, is a much more lovely, pleasant, desirable place than the horrible desert quarter of Saudi Arabia and the Sinai wilderness for a deity to dwell in. This is what I'm trying to put across. The myopic view obviously is coming from those who live in this area and they can't get out of it. And so, in trying to please their deity, they're going to make his temple in their country, and he will live with them. And from their country, from their chosen status, he will then rule the rest of the world. The entire idea of ruling all the other nations is a man-made doctrine. It obviously comes from a human who cannot live very long, because an immortal doesn't have to rule anything or anybody. An immortal doesn't have to worry about having a limited lifetime to get things done like humans do. It doesn't matter where you dwell. It really doesn't. That would be an immortal point of view. That's not the view we get in the Old Testament. Apologize for coughing so much. Yeah, Derek, good point. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate you, brother. Yeah. The conquest narratives is clearly something humans would want. not a billion-year-old wise deity who knows better. And sincerely, this is what Derek and I are doing, essentially, is we're giving them as much of the benefit of the doubt as we can. But it doesn't work. Their theology is mucked up. Here's another point that just absolutely drove me crazy. Heiser on page 213 admits this. He says, the thinking is foreign to us. See, the picture that emerges from the biblical text and archaeology is that vestiges of the Nephilim bloodline were scattered throughout Canaan among a number of other people's groups. The aim of the conquest was to drive out all of the inhabitants and eliminate those bloodlines in the process. The thinking is foreign to us, but it was part of the supernatural worldview of the biblical writers. And my comment on that is, coming from an immortal being, that is impossible to accept, because it is these desert people who are getting that attitude from their deity, of which an immortal being wouldn't give a flying flip about in the first place. So it makes no sense. That's part of my issue with it. This whole war of extermination, as far as I'm concerned, is entirely immoral. Hold on, let me close this. People are coming home from school. So, and here's another issue that I wanted to. Hey, Carmen Gale. I'm not talking about where did the Nephilim come from at this point. I'll do some other videos on Nephilim. I think Derek has done some that you could really benefit from. Reading Heiser's book made me want to start doing. Don't. I'm busy. Not right now. Thank you. Thank you, buddy. Hey, I'll be done in a few minutes, Connor. I'm recording. Thank you, buddy. My grandson. He's a good kid. He's an energetic kid. What was I lying about? Oh yeah, this Karen, this war of holy extermination is literally only from a human viewpoint. Deities don't care if other deities live forever because it does not threaten their eternality, their immortality. So there is no need to try to extinguish everybody else. It wouldn't matter. There's plenty of room in the entire universe. Why on earth would they pick one small speck of dust and the worst spot on that speck of dust to live and rule and reign? That's simply ridiculous. I'm not trying to be skeptical. I'm trying to be realistic. And I get why Heiser is doing this, because he wants us to recognize that the underlying theological reality of the Old Testament narrative is supposed to be ours, and that is where I protest. I say, not even. It's too human. It's all too human, which is the problem. So here is his idea. He does a section summary on page 215 and 216. I'm going to read a couple of his paragraphs because this is really important. Yeah, that's a good point, Last Frybender. Absolutely. Good point, Myth Vision. It does remind you of the Greek stuff. And Heiser does talk about the influence of several of the other cultures around ancient Israel, to be sure. Here's what Heiser says. He says, the wars of conquest under Moses and Joshua were supposed to cleanse the land of a competing divine bloodline and install Yahweh's own children, his inheritance, into the place he had allotted for them. Now, later on, he says that this whole plan was for the benefit of all humanity. It is not. This is, again, one of my beefs. These guys are so myopic in their outlook that their deity only wants them to rule and reign with him over all else. So that's not how an immortal would think. It's strictly for Israel. They don't represent all of humanity. Their worldview is they didn't even realize there were other people on the earth outside of the Mediterranean, Mesopotamian area. They were unaware of 90% of the rest of the world. But an immortal being could not have been that ignorant. There's the problem. So frankly, it didn't seem much like Eden. Yes, that's because Yahweh made it a hell for them himself. This is something Heiser won't do. He's much like Mormon bishops and Mormon stake presidents. In this regard, oh, I gotta open this door. I'm sweating. He blames Israel. And yet Yahweh is the one that made the promise, I will fight your fight for you. I will help you as you obey me. He made it so nitpicky and persnickety, impossible to obey his every single word, that they failed and failed and failed, and then he turned around and blamed them. But Yahweh is the one that made Eden the hell, right? So, in contrast to the beginnings of Eden, the installation of Israel into the land had been violent. Gee, I wonder why. It's because Yahweh said, go slaughter everybody. This isn't about humanity. This is about Israel, a very limited portion of humanity, not even 1% of 1% of them. And yet we're supposed to accept this as the ultimate reality for the rest of the planet. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. Yahweh's original, those means of violence, get this. He says this on page 215. He says those means of violence were necessary to revive Yahweh's original vision in a fallen world, a world full of divine and human conflict, of free imagers seeking their own will, not the will of the Creator. Yahweh could have just spoken Israel into existence in the land. He could have acted unilaterally as high sovereign to resuscitate his rule on earth. See, that's human thinking. An immortal wouldn't be thinking this at all. That's what I don't grasp. Heiser can't see that. This is so fascinating how blind Heiser is to this, too. And I'm not ridiculing him. Yahweh's decisions in the original Eden meant that he would not overturn human or divine freedom in his imagers. Humanity is what Heiser calls Yahweh's imagers. We're made in his image. So we are the imagers. Yahweh had chosen to accomplish his ends through imagers loyal to him against imagers who weren't. Why would an immortal being give a flip about loyalty? But a limited, weak human? Oh, hell yes. Loyalty is prime directive number one from a human who is going to soon die. But for an immortal, loyalty has nothing to do with anything. Again, that's why I see this as being invented by people, not coming from a deity, let alone an immortal deity. So, this commitment to humanity, it's not to humanity. He's wiping out everyone else who doesn't think like his own chosen people, so that they can rule and lord it over everyone else. And that's how Heiser puts it in his book. It's amazing. This commitment to humanity, his original images on earth, is one often missed. Reason why, when humanity, and then he has in parenthesis, Israel, there's the problem. Israel is not humanity. And yet Heiser wants to let us imagine that it is. It is not. Let's get that straight. We've got archaeology showing there were a lot more people than just Israel in the Old Testament times, right? This is why when humanity failed to restore God's rule, God took matters into his own hands by becoming human in Jesus Christ. And here is my first idea that popped into my head. So plan A sucked because it failed, and now an immortal is going to go with plan B. You have absolutely got to be kidding me. In billions of years of existence and experience and learning and creating the universe, God can't come up with a better plan than one that's going to fail? Come on. You want me to swallow this swill as if it's real, and it can't possibly be. And I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm trying to understand this. Here's what else he says. Consequently, in a world governed by other gods who had become hostile rivals in the wake of Yahweh's judgment at Babel, Yahweh's presence was unwelcome. There would be war. There would be death. The land had to be repossessed and made holy. Again, more of the myopia. You see, only Israel, which is less than 1% of the entire earth, is considered holy, when in point of fact, the entire world should be seen as holy. What they need is the Gaia principle. Now, this isn't me reading my modern view back onto them. I'm saying an immortal being. Hang on just one second, I'm recording. I'm saying an immortal being would have known that that one small patch of land is nothing above all the rest of it. So what you doing?
We're heading out. We gotta go bring our friends to the airport.
Okay,
so
okay. Oh, thank you. Good to see you again. Got to hug my granddaughter. Yeah, good. I'm glad you're doing good.
Yeah.
I love your hairdo.
Thank you.
That's pretty.
That's my Mother's Day gift.
That's pretty radical. Yeah.
I feel like a mermaid. Probably look like one too. I love
Thanks, Zach. Good to see you. All right. Well, that's probably true too. The last fry bender. Yeah, I get that. So anyway, the land had to be repossessed and made holy. Canaan would be Yahweh's beachhead of cosmic geography from which Israel could fulfill its mission. Israel would be a kingdom of priests, a conduit through which the disinherited nations of the earth would see Israel's prosperity. Now, who gives a damn about showing off their wealth? Immortals or humans? But part of the mission is to show off how filthy rich we are, and that proves we're right. I mean, these guys are like Mormons today. They think wealth is the answer to truth. Only humans think this way. This whole setup is obviously being man-made. That's the point. An immortal wouldn't give a damn. The immortal can make an entire earth out of gold. You think he's going to care about the wealth on this earth? No, but people will. You see what I mean? This isn't a divine vision. This is simply some desert people who wish things were better for them. Why? Because they've always been subjugated. Yeah, they've always been dying. Nobody respects them. They're poor, etc. So they come up with this theology that will make them what? Number one. In the process, what do? They make Yahweh stronger than Baal. They replace the ancient Near Eastern god pantheons with their own deity and say, hey, guess what? Our storm god is bigger and stronger than yours. So there. I mean, come on, the atheists have a very good point with this particular interpretation of theology that the Old Testament is giving us. This is obviously not coming from a God. So here's what I'm trying to get to. The surrounding peoples would hear of Israel's God. They would see his unmatched power and seek his covenantal love. Now, who but a human would worry about any of that, right? The nations would be reclaimed, not by force. Of course not. You've already wiped them out in Joshua and Judges. You've already wiped them out because they're different than you and don't think like you do. And God told you to do it. But by free imagers choosing to turn toward the true God, the creator and Lord of all. At least that was the plan. And so my point is, this never succeeded. And it's 2024 right now. We are talking, when was this put together? The Old Testament, 600, just shortly after the Babylonian destruction and the Jews being brought back by Cyrus is when the Old Testament was actually put together and mostly written, etc. So 500 BC. So we're talking 2,500 years later, and none of this has happened. None of it. Plan A failed. And Heiser says so. So plan B is, well, now God has to come to humanity in the form of Jesus Christ. All of that is man-made. It just is. It's astonishing. Maybe there's a plan C when plan B fails. Let me ask you a question. You look at the earth right now, do a Google search on what percent of people belong to Christianity, what percent belong to Buddhism, etc. It's 2024. Has Jesus yet succeeded? Has Christianity yet succeeded in uniting all peoples, getting everyone to look at the wealth of Israel and loving it so much that they all become Israel and that they all decide, yes, this is for me. I accept that God. Are you flipping kidding me? For real. This still hasn't happened. This vision won't happen. It's all man-made. That's the downside of all of this. Yes, in fact, he does, Carmen Gale. Thank you. Yes, Heiser would say that it was all to preserve agency and slowly undo the traditions of the fathers over time, from superstitions and fear to a better humanity, wealth symbolic to forgiveness, love, etc. That's true. He would say that, but he wants me to accept this particular revelation in the Old Testament and supernatural worldview as the truth about reality. And that I can't do because it's not. It's man-made. Yeah. And God is still taking his loving, sweet time. In the meantime, tens and hundreds of billions of people come and they go. Worlds come and worlds go. And it's obviously not that critical or important to God to finish up his project. It's okay if he's an immortal, see, he has no reason to rush. He could take another 1,000,000 years before he succeeds in making Israel the captains in charge of the earth. Yeah, he could take another 1,000,000,000 years. It wouldn't matter to an immortal, only to us humans. That's why when everyone says, well, Jesus is coming quick. Ooh, the second coming's right around the corner. That's all human. Of course we want it now because we're going to die shortly, but an immortal isn't. It's irrelevant to him what time it is. Time only matters to someone who doesn't have an eternity of it. Humans. An immortal doesn't care. He could be floating around in the cosmos for 1,000,000,000,000 years, and it's all good to him because his life doesn't end, but ours does. So anyway, yeah. And so this is the thing. I say, what a stupid myopic deity if this plan is coming from him. It was already holy. The entire earth, not just a small patch of sand like Israel. And the reason why it's in Israel is, of course, because the Israelites dreamed up this God. And they want him to be the big macho tough guy. And so, of course, it's their deity that's going to rule and reign over the entire universe, right? And from where? Their homeland. See, to them, the earth is their small patch of land. They have no idea about the American continents over on this side and the tens of millions of people living on the other side underneath their feet. They don't even realize that's even there. But an immortal would know that because he's been around for billions of years. Again, I know I'm hammering that home. It's boring you, and there's a lot of people who are starting to leave, and I can't blame you, but that's my problem with Heiser. Here again, not surprisingly, the rest of Israel's history is a sordid roller coaster ride. Loyalty to Yahweh, refusing to worship any other God, was, of course, at the heart of salvation in the Old Testament, and that is why we know it's man-made, because an immortal won't even worry about this concept of loyalty. He needs no loyalty, but a human sovereign does. A human king, oh, he's got to have loyalty or he loses his power. But if absolutely no human ever had any loyalty to any god, it would not affect their power or their immortal status or their ability to keep creating stuff or their ability to get filthy flippin' rich or their ability to destroy other worlds. They wouldn't care. That's why we know this whole concept. The entire Old Testament and New Testament setup gives us the appearance of coming from very limited, short-sighted people, not an immortal divine being. That's just how it is. And he says, but Yahweh wouldn't give up entirely on Israel. Oh, and then, of course, he blames Israel. Oh, this is all Israel's fault. You can't ever blame the deity. It's always the human's fault. See, Mormonism is superb at doing this. Now we find Heiser doing the same thing with Yahweh in the Old Testament. Yahweh would not give up entirely on Israel. The book of Judges makes it clear that he would respond to both repentance and apostasy with equal consistency, which of course he didn't. The visible Yahweh did show up from time to time. What's wrong with just coming and dwelling with his people right now and winning the earth with them right now? Like he promised, he said, I will fight your wars for you. What's wrong with living here? Because it's just a speck of dust in an utterly magnificent cosmos you've already created. We sweep up the dust on the floor into the dustpan and throw it out on the garbage heap for very good reason, because it is entirely irrelevant to our magnificent, gorgeous world here now. Well, to an immortal, the cosmos is that way. The earth is a mere speck of dust, you see. That's why I say this is so short-sighted. So the visible Yahweh did show up from time to time. Gideon, Judges 6, Samson, Judges 13. But it was only with Israel's last judge, the faithful Samuel, that Yahweh's appearances become less regular and less rare. So he failed and he went off to pouting. It just doesn't make sense. God announced through his prophets that the plans had changed. Yes, because his first plan was so obviously stupid and limited and myopic that it failed, and he would have known that being billions of years old. So why on earth even pick it? You see, there's the problem that I have. This whole idea of spiritual warfare is the theological problem in the Old Testament. And he's actually blind. Heiser doesn't see that as the problem. So, well, thank you. And again, this is just my view. I can be wrong, and I will be. And I'm going to stop there. I'm almost done with the book. I'm going to stop there ranting and raving because I am repeating myself, but for very good reason. And it is so cotton picking hot down here. I love Louisiana. Had great food and all, but holy shish kebab. It is way too hot down here. I can't wait to get back home. So anyway, that is my overall interpretation of Heiser. What makes this easier to see is because of his simply superb and magnificent scholarship. It is so good that the problem presents itself much stronger than it ever could from a pulpit preacher in a Baptist, Catholic, Mormon, Seventh-day Adventist, or Jehovah's Witness church setting. Heiser's scholarship shows that the immortal council simply could not possibly think the way the Old Testament has them thinking. That's the fatal defect, in my opinion. So I'm going to call it good at that. I've been at this 45 minutes. Thank you so much to all of you who showed up. Thank you for all your support and help and love and comments. I appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the like button if you would, please, and go share this with more of your friends. And I will when I get back home, I will wrap up Heiser's book and share more ideas, and I will get on to some more documentaries. I'm out of my library, so I didn't want to do too many documentaries while I'm here. So anyway, I'm going to head out. I love y'all. I got to go. I will be back just as soon as possible. Have a great time. Remember, you're awesome. Don't argue with me. I'm right.